My husband wants to name our daughter after the woman he loved before me, and I just realized I'm just a vessel for her memory. I never thought a baby name could end a marriage. I'm 29, pregnant with our first child, and my world has shattered over a single, unbearable request. The life we'd built, the future we'd painted in such careful, hopeful strokes, now lay in fragments at my feet, all because of a name. My husband, David, is 35. We've been married for 2 years, together for 4 before that. He was kind, thoughtful, and our life in a quiet Seattle suburb felt like a settled dream. We met at a friend's barbecue, a mundane setting for what I believed was a destined connection. He was funny, grounded, and there was a depth to his eyes that spoke of a life lived with feeling. I knew about his past, of course. It wasn't a secret. Before me, there was Anna. They were high school sweethearts, inseparable from the age of 16, married in a simple ceremony the summer after they graduated college. She died from a sudden, aggressive illness when they were both just 25, a brutal, swift end to a love story that had defined his entire adult life. He carried that grief with him, a quiet, solemn weight I always respected. He spoke of her with a fond, gentle sadness that never felt like a threat. He kept a single photo of them on his desk, a smiling, sun-drenched image from a hiking trip. I thought his ability to love so deeply was a testament to his character. I believed that a man who could cherish a memory with such tenderness had an immense capacity for love. How naive I was. How completely I misread quiet obsession for noble devotion. Our relationship progressed with a careful warmth. He was considered partner, always attentive, but sometimes I'd catch him staring into the middle distance, a faint, sorrowful smile on his lips. I attributed it to his nature, to the lingering traces of loss. He never compared me to her, never spoke of her in a way that diminished us. It was always, Anna loved tulips, or this was Anna's favorite restaurant. I saw it as him sharing parts of himself, integrating his past into our present. I encouraged it, believing it was healthy. I wanted to be the understanding, secure partner who could hold space for all of him. I even suggested visiting her grave on the anniversary of her passing, an offer he accepted with a grateful squeeze of my hand. Standing there in the drizzle, watching him place flowers on the headstone, I felt a pang of sympathy, not jealousy. I felt I was building a life with a man of profound feeling. The cracks, when they appeared, were so fine I dismissed them as imagination, the way he'd sometimes call me Annie, if he was distracted, then correct himself with a faint flush. The box of her things in the attic he said he couldn't part with, not just mementos, but clothes, books, even half-used bottles of perfume. I told myself it was part of the process. Grief has no timeline. The pregnancy was a joy we both celebrated with tearful hugs and elaborate plans. We spent evenings brainstorming names, laughing over outrageous suggestions, and poring over parenting books. He was doting, bringing me ginger tea and rubbing my feet. For those first glorious weeks, the shadow of Anna seemed to recede, replaced by the vibrant promise of new life. I felt closer to him than ever. That's why the dinner with his parents felt like such a normal, happy milestone. We were in our cozy dining room, the table set with my grandmother's china. His parents, Linda and Robert, were lovely people who had always been warm, if a bit reserved, towards me. They were thrilled about the baby, their first grandchild. The conversation was light, full of their own anecdotes from when David was small. The glow of the future seemed to light up the room. His mother, Linda, smiled warmly over dessert and asked, "Have you two started thinking about names yet? It's never too early to brainstorm." I had David's name picked out years before he arrived. I laughed, pushing a strand of hair behind my ear, feeling the pleasant weight of my husband's hand on my shoulder. It feels a bit early, to be honest. We don't even know if it's a boy or a girl yet. We have a whole list of possibilities we're playing with. We have plenty of time. David, who had been quietly sipping his wine, looked up. His eyes, usually so warm when they met mine, had a strange, distant intensity, as if he were seeing something far beyond the walls of our home. Actually, he said, his voice clear and deliberate, cutting to the comfortable chatter like a shard of ice. I have been thinking about it. Quite seriously, I want to name the baby Anna. If it's a boy, we can use Anton. It's the masculine form. It honors the same root. The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hallway clock. My fork clattered against my plate, the sound absurdly loud. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for a wink, for any sign that this was some bizarre, poorly timed joke. But his expression was serene, earnest, lit from within by a conviction that made my blood run cold. David, I finally managed, my voice shaky, barely more than a whisper. I cleared my throat. That's a beautiful name. Of course it is. But isn't that a bit intense? Naming our child after your late wife. I used the word late deliberately, an anchor to reality. His parents exchanged a glance I couldn't decipher. Was it apprehension? Resignation? His father, Robert, cleared his throat, looked down at his plate, and said nothing. Linda's smile had become fixed, a polite mask plastered on her face. It's not intense, David corrected, his tone softening into that patient, explaining voice that now felt utterly condescending. It's a tribute, a meaningful, spiritual connection. I've had this feeling, a strong, undeniable sense ever since we calculated the due date. He reached across the table and took my hand. His touch, one so comforting, felt cold, impersonal. The baby is due in December. Anna's birthday was December 14th. Don't you see? It's a sign. It's more than a sign. It's a homecoming. It's her coming back to us. To me, his voice dropped to a reverent hush on the last words. A cold wave of nausea, entirely separate from morning sickness, washed over me. I felt the room tilt slightly. I pulled my hand back as if burned. A sign? A homecoming? David, that's not how this works. This is our child. A new person, a unique soul. Not a reincarnation of Anna. The word tasted foreign and horrifying on my tongue, a concept from a bad movie, not my living room. His face hardened, the serene conviction tightening into something stubborn and impenetrable. You're not even trying to understand. You're shutting it down because it makes you uncomfortable. This is important to me. It feels right. It feels destined. What feels right to me? I said, my voice gaining strength from a surge of panic and fury. Is naming our baby something that belongs to us, to our future, to the life we've built together, not to your past. This baby is not a monument. I was standing now. Though I didn't remember getting up, my hands were trembling. Linda leaned in, her voice a forced, placating calm. Sweetheart, please, sit down. Maybe just sleep on it. These things need time to settle. Pregnancy hormones can make everything feel so overwhelming, so black and white. It is a lovely, heartfelt gesture from David. Hormones. I snapped, turning to her, the betrayal sharp. This isn't about hormones, Linda. This is about my husband wanting to name our firstborn child after the great love of his life who died. How is that lovely for me? How is that fair to our child? To grow up as a living memorial, a shrine, to always wonder if her father sees her when he looks at her, or a ghost. My words were tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. The dinner descended into a chaotic, painful argument. David rose too, his posture defensive. He accused me of being jealous, insecure, of wanting to erase Anna's memory, because I felt threatened. He said I was proving his fears right, that I could never truly accept this part of him. his parents, while uttering phrases like, "Let's all calm down and this is a happy time," subtly sided with him. They framed my visceral, gut-level rejection as an emotional overreaction. While bizarre, spiritual demand was treated as a reasonable, if deeply felt, request. The word hormonal was thrown around like a clinical weapon, designed to invalidate my very valid terror. I finally fled to the bedroom, my heart pounding in my ears. I packed an overnight bag with trembling hands, throwing in essentials without seeing them. I called my parents, my voice breaking as I told them I was coming over, that something was very wrong. As I walked out, bag in hand, David stood in the hallway, his arms crossed over his chest, a silhouette against the soft hallway light. He didn't look sad. He looked resolved. "If you can't support me in this," he said, his voice low and chillingly steady, devoid of the heat of argument. "If you can't understand something that's fundamental about who I am, about what I believe is happening, then maybe I made a mistake. Maybe we both did." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Words were useless against a wall of belief that's solid. I just left, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing like a tomb seal. I spent the next week at my parents' house in a state of profound shock. They were livid and heartbroken for me, their support an unwavering fortress. My father, a normally placid gentleman, paced their living room, muttering about driving over and knocking some goddamn sense into him. My mother held me on the couch for hours, stroking my hair, repeating like a mantra, "You are not crazy. You are not hormonal. You are right. This is not right." The phone calls with David over that week were exercises in futility and deepening despair. He wasn't calling to apologize or check on me. He called to reiterate his position, to explain again about the significance of the date, to try and logic me into his delusion. He sent links to articles about synchronicity, about spiritual beliefs in rebirth. He didn't ask how I was feeling, how the baby was. Each conversation was a monologue about Anna, the December due date, and my failure to comprehend a beautiful cosmic truth. He was preaching, not conversing. The man I loved was being erased, sentence by sentence, replaced by this single-minded devotee of a memory. After a week of this, a strange, desperate hope took root. I believed the man I married was still in there, buried under this frightening fixation. Perhaps seeing me, face to face, in the home we shared, would break the spell. I needed to try. I drove back to our house, my palms slick on the steering wheel, rehearsing calm, rational points. When he opened the door, the absence of warmth was a physical shock. He didn't smile. He didn't reach for me. He just stepped aside and said, "Come in." He was polite, cold, distant, like a hotel concierge. We sat in the living room we had painted a soft sage green together, surrounded by books we'd chosen jointly, art we'd picked out at weekend markets. It all felt like a museum of a dead relationship, artifacts under glass. "David, please," I begged, after my carefully prepared speech dissolved in the face of his icy demeanor. I was pleading now, tears already threatening. "This isn't healthy. Think about it. For you, carrying this belief. For me, living with it. For our baby, growing up under it. We can find a compromise. We can choose a name that honors her memory in a different, gentle way. Maybe as a middle name, but as a first name. David, it's too much. It binds our child to a ghost. It binds us, every day, to a ghost. Every time we say her name, it won't be about our daughter. It will be about her." He shook his head slowly, a look of profound, almost pitying resignation on his face. "You're still speaking from a place of fear and competition. This is a negotiation. This isn't about compromise. This is a spiritual imperative for me. I believe this with my whole heart. I know it. If you can't accept that, then you don't accept me. my core being. And I can't be with someone who doesn't accept my core beliefs. A marriage can't be built on that. Core beliefs. I echoed, a hysterical, disbelieving laugh bubbling in my throat. David, a core belief is about faith or morality or how to treat other people. Not about naming our unborn child after your dead wife because of a coincidence in a calendar. That's not a belief system. That's magical thinking. It's grief twisted into something dangerous. It's not a coincidence, he shouted, finally losing his composure, his cool facade cracking to reveal the fervent, frantic man beneath. He stood up, looming over me. It's a sign, a clear, beautiful sign. And if you refuse to see it, you're refusing to see me. You're choosing blindness. I need a partner who walks beside me in this life, fully, who sees the world with the same depth of feeling. If that's not you, if you're this pragmatic, earthbound person who mocks the spiritual, then we should end this now. I mean it. I will not raise my child with someone who diminishes the most profound truth of my life. The finality in his voice was a physical blow to my chest. I couldn't breathe. I searched his eyes, desperately looking for any hint of the man who had proposed to me on a rainy beach, whispering that I was his future, the man who talked about building a family with me, creating new traditions, new stories. All I saw was a fanatic, a man whose devotion was entirely focused on a memory. The love of his life wasn't in the room with us. She wasn't even on this earth. And I realized with a crushing, suffocating clarity that I had never truly competed with her. I had just been keeping her seat warm, a temporary stand-in until the universe, in his mind, delivered her back to him through my body. I was an incubator for his salvation narrative. The dam broke. I collapsed into myself, sobbing, all my strength, my arguments, my love, leaving me in a torrent of helpless tears. For a moment, the old David flickered back into existence. The anger left his face. He softened, sat beside me, put a stiff arm around me. He whispered that he was sorry for being so intense, for shouting, but that this was too important to be gentle about. He spoke of loving us both, me and Anna, as if that were a normal, manageable state for a married man. He said his heart was big enough. That one love didn't cancel out the other. He asked me, in a tender voice that was the cruelest thing of all, to just consider it, to open my mind. When my sobs subsided into ragged hiccups, I found a last shred of clarity. I wiped my face with my sleeves and looked at him. Is this really a deal breaker? I whispered, my voice raw. You would really choose this idea, this feeling, over me and our actual living child? Over the family we are right now? He didn't look away. He held my gaze, his own eyes clear and certain, and said the words that killed every last hope. Yes, I would, because accepting this is part of accepting me. All of me. And if you can't, then we're not meant to be. It's that simple. Simple. He thought it was simple. I left that house knowing in my bones that my marriage was over. The grief that followed was tidal, overwhelming, a physical pain that left me breathless. For days, I moved to my parents' home in a fog, barely eating, sleeping in fitful bursts haunted by dreams of a little girl with a name that wasn't her own. My parents, witnessing my devastation, moved from comforting to acting. They could see I was drowning in sorrow, incapable of the practical steps to save myself. They consulted a family lawyer, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Miriam. Part of me, a weak, heartbroken part, still hoped he would call, that the shock of me leaving, of the divorce papers being mentioned, would be the cold water he needed. But the silence from him was deafening. It wasn't angry silence. It was the silence of a man who had already made his choice and was waiting, with a martyr's patience, for me to catch up to reality. We filed for divorce. Miriam handled everything with efficient compassion. When David was served, the reaction I'd vaguely expected, shock, anger, a frantic call, didn't come. He called me hours later. His voice was eerily calm, polite, almost pleasant, as if discussing a minor change in dinner plans. He asked me if I was serious, if I had thought this through, giving me a grace period of 5 days to reconsider my stance. He said he was disappointed in my stubbornness, that I was letting jealousy and a closed mind destroy our family. He spoke of his request as a freedom to name his first child, framing my veto as a tyrannical act. His tone was the most infuriating part. It felt like this was a minor administrative setback in his grand spiritual plan. Then came the text, a long, meticulously typed paragraph that laid all the blame squarely at my feet. He rewrote our history. Our happy years became a period where he'd hoped I'd grow to understand the depth of his connection to Anna. My respect for his past was recast as tacit approval for his future delusion. He said he was now rethinking our entire marriage, wondering if any of my love had been true or if I had just been pretending, waiting for him to get over Anna. He called me insecure, jealous, and ultimately shallow, unable to grasp the profound beauty of what he was offering. He ended by saying he was at peace with my decision, as it revealed my true character. That text was a catalyst. The all-consuming grief turned to ash, and in its place, a clear, cold, and steady anger settled. This wasn't grief. This was pathology. He was lost in a cult of memory, and he was willing to sacrifice his living wife and unborn child on its altar. I was no longer a partner. I was an obstacle to his bizarre, spiritual reunion fantasy. The love I felt didn't vanish, but it was suddenly placed in a new, horrifying context. I blocked his number on everything. The line was drawn. The divorce proceedings were stark, clinical, and fast. He didn't contest the terms. He didn't fight for assets. He didn't even fight for custody beyond a standard shared parenting agreement. His only point of stipulation, inserted by his lawyer, was a clause about mutual agreement on major decisions regarding the child's upbringing, which Miriam said was boilerplate, but she strengthened the language to ensure my primary custodial rights. His detachment was chilling. The house was sold. The profits split. I heard through the sparse, necessary legal communication that he had moved, not to a new place, but back into the small, one-bedroom condo he and Anna had shared, the one he kept all these years but had never once suggested we live in. He kept it furnished, a time capsule. That final piece of information sealed everything. He wasn't just stuck in the past. He was actively, willingly retreating into it, closing the door behind him. A few weeks later, his parents called me. Their voices, when I finally decided to answer, were heavy with regret and shame. They apologized profusely, stumbling over their words. They admitted they had always been quietly worried about how he'd never processed Anna's death, that he'd idealized her into sainthood and frozen himself in that moment of loss. They said they'd been afraid to confront him, terrified of pushing him away or triggering a breakdown. So they'd enabled him, nodding along even when they knew his demand to me was profoundly wrong. They said they were sorry for not supporting me at that dinner, for using the word hormonal, for not being the voice of reason I needed. Their apology was bittersweet. It confirmed every terrible suspicion but changed absolutely nothing. The man was gone, lost in his own labyrinth of grief, and they were just as powerless as I was. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. My belly grew round and tight with my daughter, my own daughter, who kicked and tumbled inside me, a vibrant, stubborn, independent life asserting herself. I found out the gender alone, with my mother holding one hand and Miriam, who had become a fierce friend, holding the other. The ultrasound technician said, "It's a girl," and a fierce, protective love, clean and sharp and entirely my own, flooded me. It was followed by a surge of fury, so pure it was almost joyful. She would never be a placeholder. She would never bear a name that wasn't chosen first and foremost for her own story. We would not begin her life with a lie, with a burden. David attended some of the mandatory prenatal appointments. As per our court-outlined co-parenting plan, we were civil, coldly polite, speaking only about medical details. He asked once, tentatively, toward the end of one appointment, "Have you thought more about names?" I looked him straight in the eye, my hand resting on my belly. "I've chosen one," I said, my voice even and firm. "It's not Anna. It won't be Anna. It will never be Anna." He just nodded, a shadow of something, loss, frustration, defeat, passing over his face, and didn't ask again. The day I brought my daughter home from the hospital was the brightest, most terrifying, most exhilarating day of my life. My parents' house was filled with soft light and the scent of the lilacs I loved. I held her in the rocking chair that had been mine as a baby, this perfect, squalling, red-faced, beautiful person, and I whispered her name into the downy softness of her head, a name that meant new beginning, a name that meant light after darkness, a name that belonged only to her, to this new, uncharted story we would write together, just the two of us. It was a covenant. Later, I signed her birth certificate with a steady hand. The line for father had his name, a legal fact, but the line for a child's name was mine to fill. I wrote it clearly, decisively. Her name was a promise that she was her own person, loved for herself alone, not as a symbol, not as a sign, not as a vessel for anyone's memory. She was my future. The past, with its ghosts and its beautiful, broken man, could keep itself. We were turned resolutely toward the dawn.